This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Office culture has shifted dramatically over the last 5 years, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, offices emptied out, and many people started working from home for the first time in their lives. I was a reporter at the time, recording stories in my closet between my dresses and coats and praying my microphone wasn't going to pick up the sound of my neighbor's beagles barking next door. But as COVID case numbers dropped, some people started going back to the office. Others kept working from home. Maybe they had moved to a new city or state during the pandemic or liked not having a commute. Some of us tried to create hybrid work situations for ourselves. A few days at home, a few days in the office. This year brought yet another seismic shift. When President Trump was inaugurated for his second term, he ordered federal workers back to the office. Some cities and states began contemplating similar moves, including Vermont. Here's Governor Phil Scott at a press conference on August 7th.
Well, certainly, remote work has been helpful during this time, but we have plans to bring people back, at least part-time. So we are hopeful in the next few months to roll out our program about how to bring people back into the offices.
A few weeks later, the new policy became official. Vermont state employees will have to return to the office at least 3 days per week starting this December. Today on Vermont Edition, we're going to explore how state workers and state leaders are preparing for this big shift in office culture. Later in the hour, we'll talk with the executive director of the Vermont State Employees Union. We also reached out to members of the Scott administration, but our interview requests were either denied or we did not receive a response in time for today's show. We do want to hear from you this hour as well. Has your employer changed their policy on remote work recently? Have you been called back to the office? Even if you're not a state employee, we'd really like to get your perspective on this because a lot of you have been grappling with finding the right balance between remote and in-person work. You can give us a call at 800-639-2211 or send us an email, as many of you already have, to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. First, though, let's get into a bit of research about labor policies like these return to work orders, because a lot of employers have been trying to figure this out in the years since the pandemic. We're joined by Kristen Smith, a visiting associate professor of sociology at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. She's also the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy's research shop director. Kristen, welcome to Vermont Edition.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So can you bring us back to the time before the pandemic, a time in which I have very few lasting memories. Was remote work common in any sectors pre-pandemic?
No, remote work really took off during the pandemic. About 7% of workers were fully working remote in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And these were workers that were in jobs that really allowed that kind of work to be done. So technology, things that were done mostly on computers, that kind of thing. But it was really uncommon overall in the workforce to have workers be working remotely from home.
And then we saw this massive shift, which I know you've been following closely. And you do a lot of research that focuses primarily, as I understand it, on gender inequality in labor markets and how some of these different policies can affect the genders differently. Is there a difference in the percentage of men who work from home compared to women? And has that changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So during the pandemic, a lot of people were sort of pushed into remote work. Everything closed down. If you remember, my brain's kind of fuzzy, even though it was only a few years ago. But everything closed down, and any jobs where people could work remotely, employers were asking them to do so. And so during the pandemic, men and women pretty much equally worked remotely. It was very, very close in terms of that because it was so ubiquitous. But since then, in the most recent numbers in 2025 from the Census Bureau, we're seeing that just 29% of men are working remotely and 36% of women are working remotely. Whereas just a few years ago, that was very, very even for men and women. And so, it looks like managers are returning to work. It's likely the jobs that men hold are different. We know they're different from the jobs that women hold. And it's likely that, those types of jobs are the jobs that are being asked, or those workers are wanting to return to the office. So managers are returning. Men are more likely to be in those managerial jobs. That might be part of it, or not. There could be other reasons as well.
Mm. And I know you study how different tasks like household duties and taking care of children can affect employees of different genders in all sorts of ways. What are the ways in which those factors should be part of this conversation we're having today about return to work orders?
Absolutely. So, working from home, remote work, there's a lot of benefits, right? So there's pros and cons, and those benefits are it, makes work more flexible. You have more time. You're not busy commuting. You're not paying for gas, for example. And I think the flexibility is the piece that really is attractive to women and to mothers in particular, or other caregivers that are also balancing work, so fathers as well. But we're seeing, that this added flexibility can also have costs. So there can be some cons to working remotely, particularly if remote work gets branded as a female dominated thing. It could be associated with less reliability or less devotion to work. It kind of then would take on sort of this mommy track view. And if employers and other workers see those remote workers as being less committed, for example, then those workers will be passed up for promotion or recognition. And so there is sort of this double-edged sword to workers who are considering either continuing in this type of job, or they already are in there, or they're thinking about joining a remote job. Really need to think about, those other things, because we still live in a society where the workplace is still focused on this ideal worker and the ideal worker norm. And so the ideal worker is someone who's always in the office and can, be called upon at any time, doesn't have any responsibilities at home. They have someone else doing that backstage support. And so it's a broader conversation about how do we have equity in the workplace, especially in places where remote work is part of that culture. So, thinking about how do we make that a more equitable workforce where women or whoever's working remotely doesn't lose out on those opportunities for promotion and recognition.
Hmm. Now, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Dartmouth College Associate Professor of Sociology, Kristen Smith, a visiting professor. And we're talking about return to work orders in the context of Vermont, where state employees are being called back to the office 3 days a week beginning in September. Kristen, what you were just saying about this quote unquote mommy track reminds me of an email that we got ahead of today's show from a listener named Megan, who's in Milton. And she writes, I have a baby in a local daycare. My work location was moved 45 plus minutes away from where I live and in the opposite direction of daycare. This decision shows to me that the Governor Scott, doesn't care about keeping young families in Vermont. As such a large employer, the state has an opportunity to lead in showing how work-life balance can retain the next generation to stay here. My option right now feels like I need to leave the state to find new opportunities in my field of study. And I'm desperate for the governor to reconsider because I love my job, love serving the people of Vermont, and love my community. So this email, it seems like, is touching on the point you were just making, Kristen, about how retention could possibly be affected. We don't know yet, but could be affected by these return to work orders.
Yeah, that caller is spot on, right? So these are the things that workers are going to be grappling with. Do I stay at my job and drive all these distance? And if it's the wrong direction for daycare, that's just like double time in the car. So employers really need to think about the job satisfaction of workers, and turnover. So retention is a big piece. The Pew research, they interviewed remote workers, and about half of them, 46%, said that they would quit if they had to go to the office full time. And so that's something that employers really need to take seriously, because they could lose really great workers if they implement a policy that just doesn't work for the remote workers, especially, if you're working out of state, if you're living out of state, um, like that just becomes untenable. If you're
I mean,
living in
but that could
Massachusetts, for
also be
example.
a motivation for some employers, like we saw with the efforts by DOGE at the federal level, to both reduce the size of the federal workforce and call back federal employees to the office at the same time. That callback did have the effect, which was partially intended by the federal government to reduce the number of employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what the intentions of Governor Scott is in terms of retention and looking to reduce the state workforce. Um, but I do know that, workers' satisfaction is a really important piece of workplace culture. And if you have workers who are dissatisfied, whether it's because they are being called back from remote work or other things, that does lead to higher turnover.
Mm. Um, do you study generational differences between people wanting to work or be in an office? We've talked about these gender divides, but I am curious about whether a new generation of workers might feel differently about this than an older generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the older generations, my group, we are much more likely to be working in person, and it's the younger workers, the millennials are apparently the largest group of remote workers, and so that's an important piece as well. We really want to maintain a diverse pool of workers and employers really should be thinking about how their policies will it could whittle down the pool. So one of the nice things about remote work for employers is that they have a larger pool of potential workers. If they're allowing people to work at home, they could get the brightest talent from all over the country, for example. Um, and the same is true, if those bright stars are living in, I don't know, Massachusetts or another state, they'll be more likely to be able to find another job than, if they're weighing those the pros and cons of, going back to in person or finding another job. The best and brightest workers are going to be able to make that jump.
Mm. To your point, we got an email from a listener named Michelle who writes, I'm a state employee and have heard from countless other state employees in Vermont that they're actively looking for, applying for, and interviewing for jobs because of the governor's return to office mandate. These are trained, competent people with 5, 10, 15 years of experience and institutional knowledge. Vermonters should be concerned with the mass exodus because it takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money to recruit, hire, and onboard new employees. We've heard a lot from state employees like Michelle, and we also want to hear from you if you disagree. Maybe you are a state employee who is glad that there is a return to office order in effect, or you're part of a company that has brought employees back to the office and you've seen a positive change in productivity or workplace culture. We'd love to hear all different perspectives on this conversation. You can email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org or call in at 800-639-2211. Kristen, lastly, we're about to speak with the head of the Vermont State Employees Association, the union that represents state employees. Now, it does seem like this return to work order, it's going into effect in just a couple of months. Do you think that there are ways in which employees right now, is they're kind of in this liminal space? How do you think they could be thinking about this moment for the future of their employment, either as an opportunity, a time to negotiate, or maybe a time to look for a new line of work?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, every worker's situation is going to be different, and they need to just, I always like to do the pros and cons. I'm a statistician, so I'm very,
We love a list.
yeah. I love my list. So I like to do those comparisons. But one of the things that we are experiencing right now is a tightening of the labor market. So it is harder for workers to find jobs right now.
Yeah.
And so thinking through, how a tight labor market, it may be more difficult to find a new job right now, remote or otherwise, just because of what's happening in the labor market.
Well, we're going to have to take a short break here and say goodbye to Kristen Smith, a visiting associate professor of sociology at Dartmouth College. Kristen, thanks so much for sharing your expertise and your research with us today.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Well, stick around because in a minute we're going to be joined by the head of the Vermont State Employees Association, the union that represents Vermont's 8,000 or so state employees. We also want to hear from you. If you've been involved in a return to work order in the past year or so, give us a call. 800-639-2211 is our number. You can also email Vermont Edition at vermontpublic.org. And stick around for more conversation in just a moment. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. This hour, we're discussing the return to office order for Vermont state employees. People who work for the state will be expected to be in the office at least 3 days a week, starting on December 1st. A recent survey shows the change could affect up to a third of state workers. Many of them began working remotely, of course, during the pandemic. We're joined now by the executive director of the Vermont State Employees Association, Steve Howard. Steve, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I also want to note that we reached out to multiple departments within the Scott administration to invite an administration official to join today's conversation. Our interview requests were denied by the heads of the Agency of Administration and Buildings and General Services. We also reached out to Governor Scott's office this morning, but did not hear back by the time our show went to air. You will hear some clips from Governor Phil Scott's recent press conferences during the rest of our conversation today, and we also have the memos that were sent out by state leaders to state employees in the past couple months regarding these return to work orders. So, Steve, there are about 8,000 total state employees. Are they all part of the union that you lead up?
They're not all part of the union. VSE has about 6,100 members, and there's about 1,700 folks in the bargaining unit who are not members. So then the remainder adds up to a little over 8,000.
Okay. And judging by our inbox over the last few days, I am guessing that you have received a lot of emails and phone calls and had a lot of conversations with state employees about this return to work order. Yeah?
Yes. The response from state employees has been overwhelming. We had a Zoom just the other day with over almost 300 people on their lunch hour who joined a union meeting to talk about what they could do in response to this proposal.
Well, let's hear a clip first from Governor Phil Scott. This is from a video statement that he released on September 8th.
And I know some of you look at your own situation and can't understand why we're doing this. We have to look at our organization as a whole. With this broader view, I know we do our best work when we're together. But the time is now to make this move.
The time is now to make this move. Do you agree?
I think this couldn't be the worst time to make this move. State employees in response to pandemics and floods have both shown up at the work site where the work had to be done physically in the work site, and who have, in a moment's notice, transformed their kitchens and their dining rooms into operational offices for the state of Vermont. And the rate of success has just been I think impressive. This is probably the worst time that this could be pursued, mostly because if you look at the research that the administration has done, their own research shows that 90% of state employees find that they collaborate effectively when working remotely. And 83% of those state employees believe that their performance is positively impacted by remote work. So at a time when the state has 899 vacant positions that have been vacant for quite some time, this is really the wrong time to make this kind of move, if there was ever a good time to do it. I think the reality is remote work has been a remarkable success, and this is really a solution in search of a problem.
So your word, it could negatively affect recruitment and retention of state employees, among other issues. And you also just said, Steve, that state employees believe that they're doing a good job working from home. But from what I can tell from these memos from the state government, it isn't just about how employees feel. It's about how the rest of the Vermont populace perceives the work of the state government. There was this August 28th memo from the Secretary of Administration, Sarah Clark, and she said, I'm quoting here, "Vermonters value access to their government, a visible presence in the communities we serve, and insight into how we work collectively in service to them." Do you believe that more in-person work could in any way increase Vermonters' trust in their state government, especially at this time when people are, frustrated by high taxes, they're seeing the federal government downsize, and might think, hey, why aren't we doing more of that here?
Well, I think that the one thing I think the people of Vermont have seen is that when there is a demand, the state employees rise to the occasion, and they have delivered for the people that they serve in the state consistently. Yeah. The real focus of this discussion should really be on the results and not on where those results are achieved. And so, a lot of the frustration with government is really frustration with the decisions that politicians make, not necessarily with the level of service that the state employees deliver, except when they're enforcing the decisions that politicians have made.
We got an email to your point from Kelly and Warren, who says, "My division does field work in communities. We do not interact with the public in our offices. Forcing us back into cubicles will not improve collaboration. It will undermine it. Many of us have relocated, downsized vehicles, and built our lives around this model. A 3-month turnaround announced after the school year began and without a clear plan is unrealistic, unsafe, and destabilizing." Now, Secretary of Administration Sarah Clark did say that their goal was to communicate a thoughtful, complete approach well before it goes into effect. Giving employees reasonable time to plan and adjust is one of our top goals. What I'm hearing from you, Steve, though, is that they have not achieved that goal, that this 3 months is not enough time.
Well, I think there's a saying in the labor movement that is pretty well known, and it's really that there should be nothing about us without us. And really, this whole process has been one in which the state employees who know the most about the delivery of state services, and I'll point out that state employees are taxpayers, just like anybody else. And they really know what's the most effective way to deliver state services in a way that managers don't. So in this process, the VSEA represents 6,100 employees. We've gotten like 5 minutes notice before a letter goes out to all of our members or all state employees across the state. There's a secret committee that's meeting to decide how this policy is going to be implemented, something that affects the...
Sorry, what do you mean by secret? They have said that they're the agencies that are represented on this committee? Why do you call it secret?
Well, because really the people who should be involved in this discussion are the people who are the most impacted. So those are two groups. One is our members, who are, as you heard from the folks, the person who emailed in, whose lives are going to be turned upside down by this whole process. Some folks who were hired with the commitment that they could work remotely, given very little time after to change that. But also, our members are the folks who know how the work of state government gets done in the most efficient and effective way. And this really is a process that's been set up that doesn't include the state employees. We're not part of that commission. We really should be, because we are the ones who hold the information about how this is going to affect the delivery of services to Vermonters. The other thing that's really sort of persistent in the that I've heard persistently across the board, Governor has made a very strong point about Vermont needing to be more affordable. And it needs to be more affordable for everybody, and that includes state employees. So I've heard from a number of state employees of the added costs that are going to be unnecessarily added to their to their budget, which they hadn't planned for. Because of the cost of housing and the requirement to live really further out than they have before, added costs for childcare, adult daycare, added commuting costs. Is it just affordable for some, or is it affordability for everybody?
We've received a number of emails from state employees echoing that sentiment, including Serena, who says that when they started at the health department, their office was in Burlington. After COVID, while staff continued working successfully from home, the governor and legislature sold the building. Now I'll be required to commute 60 miles several times a week. The Waterbury complex they'll be going to isn't well suited for my work. Most desk stations are in open areas, which make it difficult to do my job when so many of my meetings are with out-of-state partners. If you have thoughts about return to office orders, maybe you have dealt with one and have some ideas on what could make one more successful for a group of people like Vermont state employees, give us a call at 800-639-2211. With Catherine from Montpelier calling in. Catherine,
Hi.
go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear us?
Thank you.
Catherine, are you with us?
Hello? Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Oh, so, yeah, I was a federal employee. My office located in Washington, D.C., and during the pandemic, we made a very quick turnaround to remote work, a very successful and quick turnaround to remote work that saved the federal government millions upon millions of dollars. I worked for the Immigration Service, specifically in the service center operations. We shut down our service center. We took all of our A files, which are big, huge files with all of the documentation for all of the non-citizens in the United States, and digitized them. So we got rid of all kinds of FedEx, UPS, mail, all that kind of stuff, turnaround. The fact of the matter is that it's very clear to the federal employees that the goal of the return to work at the federal level is punitive. It's punitive for the workers, because the fact is that my former colleagues are still working remotely, except that they're working remotely in an office building that is not set up for them. Their boss is nowhere nearby. They're still having all of their meetings on Zoom. They're not actually having any in-person meetings. And I support people. I mean, I live in Montpelier, so of course I would love to see, I want people to be working in the state government in Montpelier, because I think the businesses here rely on that. But as your previous guest said, all of the employees went remote, and it was effective. And now it's, sorry, there's a big truck outside. Now what's happening is, this fast turnaround, it's a huge blow to people's, way of life, their, the way that they live their lives. And I mean, without including flexibilities, meaning like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't work for you to work in the office.
Right.
5 days a
Those
week.
accommodations can be really important, and I want to talk about those with our guest, Steve. And Catherine, thank you so much for calling in and for pointing out this fact that we've seen these return to work orders happening at the federal level, and that's affected many people in our region who work for the federal government. and now it's happening at the state level. First, before we get to those accommodations, Steve, with the Vermont State Employees Association, I wonder if you have any thoughts based on what Catherine just said there.
I think Catherine makes a very good point. I mean, if you look even just to the state of California, where the state auditor did a robust study, it showed that that the ability to work remotely saved the state of California $225 million. So this is really something that it could be a taxpayer, a benefit to the taxpayer, a savings for the taxpayer. And I think that's something that we really ought to consider in light of what we know is coming from the federal government. We are in a time of uncertainty, and now is the time to get to your first question, now is the time to have stability. And to really make sure we have employees who feel really satisfied with the work with the position that they're in, so that they can help Vermonters through what is going to be a very challenging time. So I think that's really important. And I also feel like we talk a lot about the need to support small businesses, and the VSEA is a strong supporter of downtown Montpelier and downtown Waterbury, and very strong supporter of Montpelier Alive.
And Montpelier, as most of our listeners know, the downtown was very heavily affected by the 2023 flooding. Many businesses are still struggling to come back from that.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things we have heard from businesses across the state is, why does my business matter less than the businesses in the downtowns around state office buildings? So little country store owners who have contacted us and say, state employees come into my business in Richmond or in St. Albans or wherever it might be, and they buy lunch there. Why is the governor picking certain businesses, one business against the other?
But I have to imagine that when you're working from home, you're less likely to go out for lunch than you would be if you were going to the office.
That's not what I'm hearing from a lot of our members, who say they make a point to go out to break at lunch, to go support the local businesses in their community. And they're in the communities they chose. And so I think there's a need to really focus on those businesses as well. And the governor really, I think in this way, may be choosing one business over the other.
One email we just got from Kyle is interesting. Kyle says, I do support more required time in the office, but the policy is being implemented much too quickly and without genuine consultation and buy-in from the state workers who turn the wheels of government every day. Something I'm hearing from you as well, Steve. Kyle goes on to say, even those of us in support are confused by the rush because no one has explained why this is suddenly a top priority that leaves little time for us to actually figure out how we're going to do it. Now, I think is a good time for me to reiterate that we reached out to multiple departments within the Scott administration to invite an official to join today's conversation. Those requests were either denied or they didn't get back to us in time for the airing of our show today. We have lots of calls coming in. We do need to take a short break, but we will hear from you on Vermont Edition in just a moment. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you're just joining us this hour, we are taking a look at the decision by Governor Phil Scott's administration to call state workers back to the office 3 days a week. That new policy goes into effect December 1st. Our guest this hour is Steve Howard, the executive director of the Vermont State Employees Association. Vermont Edition also reached out to multiple departments within the Scott administration. Our interview requests were denied by the heads of the agency of Administration and Buildings and General Services. We also reached out to Governor Scott's office this morning, but did not hear back before the start of our show. Steve, we have lots of folks calling in, so let's get to some of those voices now. Rebecca is in Rockingham. Rebecca, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to talk about, the back to work thing. I've worked for the state for 31 years, and this has been an extraordinary opportunity for me to work from home. It really affects my ability to work given some of the health issues I have. I have kids at home. We have one car, and if I have to take the car to the office, then there's no car to get kids from school, take them to appointments. It means I'm going to have to take extra time off for health appointments, using sick leave, or annual leave, depending upon what the appointments are. I currently can do some of my health appointments that are weekly during my lunch break. That won't happen if I have to go back to the office. And so instead of using my lunch break and no sick leave, I'll probably have to use 2 to 3 hours of sick leave at least once a week to do that. So I am considering just retiring and collecting my pension and going to get another job, because working for the state of Vermont isn't what it used to be. Working for the state of Vermont used to be an honor and a privilege, and it is no longer that. We're treated horribly by the public and our administration. My department is particularly disliked by the governor, so we have even less support there.
So yeah, Rebecca, what I'm hearing is that this change in the policy about being in the office is going to cause a really big shift in how you have set up your life in all sorts of different ways. And what you're saying reminds me of an email that we got from Steve in Jericho, who works for a company that has done partial return to office, and he recognizes the benefits. He says this thoughtful RTO is done at the same time as reducing office space for workers who are not using it and saving workspace costs. That said, there are potentially many jobs that see little or no benefit from having a designated office. Because of that, both for the state and federal government, these return to office orders seem more about attrition than it does about saving taxpayer costs for any particular work function. There must be a more nuanced picture than everyone back. Aaron from Fairleigh is also calling in with some thoughts. Aaron, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call as well. Yeah. I had two thoughts. I work for the state as well, and I started remote in 2021. And most of my team did, and our collaboration, camaraderie, and rapport could not be better. We choose when to come in, besides the one day a month we're supposed to, and that means we have effective in-person meetings and get things done. We've also heard from consultants that we work through, I do permitting work, that we are more effective than we've ever been before at turnaround times, and that could fall to the wayside.
Erin, am I hearing correctly? You have a little person there with you?
You are. I'm also a new mother on maternity leave. So I can not new mother, it's my third, but
yeah. I can imagine that flexibility of working from home might be important too as well.
It is also. Personally, the flexibility of working from home and the cost of childcare, having my mom come to the house to take care of her while I work versus driving to daycare, it's just wildly different lifestyle. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for calling in. I also want to share an email from Claudia, who says that she works the exact hybrid schedule that Governor Scott is proposing, and it works great for my position. We have talented people doing these jobs very successfully. These folks benefit doing these jobs very successfully from home as well. These folks benefit the state by reducing emissions, reducing need for office space, all the things that have been mentioned by the union. My suggestion is to allow each department or supervisor to apply their discernment to the functions of their employees to make a decision. So, Steve, what Claudia is suggesting there is different than the policy that's been laid out by the administration. In your conversations with administration officials, if there have been any, do you sense any room for negotiation here?
Well, I hope so. It's clear to us that the closer you get to the people, the better the answer is going to be. So more flexibility is certainly going to be paramount. What we are seeing is that, with the ability to work remotely, we are able to both retain and attract employees at a time when state government has significant vacancies, and that affects Vermonters. Vermonters are affected when there isn't somebody in a position to do the work. So our hope is that the administration will really reconsider this proposal and will work instead collaboratively with us to meet the needs of the taxpayer, but also to really meet the needs of the workforce that is so critical to delivering those services. I think you're hearing it from Aaron, you're hearing it from callers all over the state. This is something that means a great deal to them. And it also reflects the reality see that in the last 5 years, housing has gotten more expensive. People are living further and further away from the office because they can't find housing close to the office. They're going to have to pay their child care provider, if they can find one, extra because they're going to have to get there later than the child care provider usually allows. The same with adult daycare, and we're one of the fastest aging states in the country. And I think, if the governor wants to be a forward-thinking leader, and not follow the policy of the Trump administration, he'll consider these concerns and consider the views of state workers, and really support their desire to continue to work remotely.
And while we don't have a member of the administration on with us today, we will be having Governor Phil Scott join Vermont Edition on Tuesday, September 30th. And we'll be sure to bring up what we've heard in this conversation with him at that time. This is also something that's happening in many other places besides Vermont. The Nebraska Supreme Court recently upheld the Nebraska governor's return to work order after it was challenged by the state employees union. California's governor has pushed for 4 days in the office and ended up cutting a deal with unions to limit that mandate. And Texas's governor tried to ban telework, but after a lot of pushback there, he allowed agencies to develop remote work policies. And Steve, you're talking about, how the state government, how you're hoping that they will reconsider to take into account all the very different situations that state employees in Vermont have. I want to quote once again from this August 28th memo from the Secretary of Administration, Sarah Clark, where she said that, quote, accommodations will still be available when deemed reasonable and appropriate. And I want to talk about the process around those accommodations for just a minute, because it seems like it could get a little muddy. I spoke to a primary care provider just this morning, actually, on Background, who said that multiple patients have approached them asking them to sign forms saying that they have a physical or a mental disability so that they can keep working from home. And this doctor had to refuse to sign them because they didn't agree with what the patient was bringing to them, didn't want to sign a form like that. It seems concerning that this is the point where we're at, where state employees might be trying to figure out a kind of workaround that might not necessarily be by the book. Does that concern you as well?
Well, I think it's what's really important is that this sort of abrupt change in policy has a profound impact not only on the state employees, but on their ability to deliver services. And I think this was a discussion that was sort of foisted upon us. It didn't include us. It still doesn't include us to this point. And it's clearly getting a reaction from the folks who are on the front lines that deserves the administration's attention. So I really think that the time to it's really important that the folks at the top of this administration listen to the people who they count on in floods, in snowstorms, and also pandemics, and all of these things that state employees have come through on, to hear really what the most important what's really important to them. And so it doesn't surprise me that we're getting this kind of a response from state employees, because this is a really important issue for which they have not been included in the discussion.
We have Noah who's calling in now from Essex. Noah, what are your thoughts listening to this conversation?
Hi, Michaela. Thanks for having me on. Sure. I think so much of the work that we do at the Department of Health is based in data, and it's really making sure that whatever we're putting out is really grounded in some data that we can point to. And I think for myself and a lot of my colleagues, we just really haven't received any data from the administration about why this is necessary, what the benefits are, and in many cases, as kind of has been heard earlier on, most of the data about employee retention, about employee satisfaction, that sort of thing suggests that reducing remote options really changes things and ultimately results in a cost to taxpayers for either retraining folks or otherwise having to kind of revise what that work looks like. And I think for many of us, when we moved out of the 108 Cherry Street in Burlington to Waterbury, for my division at least, we have 6 desks for 30 people or so. And so just logistically, we would like to know what this would look like, even regardless of kind of everything else. It's really concerning to look at our workstation, which is just simply not set up for this, and wondering what that's going to look like, when we're going to receive information. And there just hasn't been a lot of transparency from the administration about what this physically is going to look like for us.
Okay, so you're craving some very concrete plans about what that return to office is going to look like, where people are going to sit, what office you're going to be in, and also some more data about why this is happening. Steve, I know you cited a state run survey earlier in the hour, and I see some graphs in front of you right now. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah. So this is the state employee engagement survey that's done every year, and the Department of Human Resources puts it out. They ask our members to fill it out. They do, and what they're finding is that 90% of state employees feel that they collaborate effectively while working remotely. 83% of state employees think their performance is positively impacted by remote work, and that really shows up in the delivery of services to Vermonters. That's how it affects Vermonters directly, besides the fact that remote work saves the taxpayers money. One of the things that's really interesting is the governor talks a lot about the size of the workforce, the shrinking workforce in Vermont. And, we have 300 employees who work for the state who don't live in Vermont. Some live quite a distance from Vermont. And they're able to provide really high-quality services to the people of Vermont from wherever they might be living. A lot of people have gone to take, for whatever reason that they've moved, and with the permission of their employer to do that. So this is sort of ripping the rug out from underneath them. It's shrinking the available pool of talent for the state, and that affects the taxpayer. That affects Vermonters' ability to get services. So I think this is really just about more than just state employees. It's about the people of Vermont and having an effective and efficient government. This data is the state's data, and I think if they're going to do a survey, they ought to pay attention to the data, just as the caller suggested.
Let me quote one more point that the governor made here in the time that we have left. We all want our workplace to feel fair. And Governor Scott, in a video that he released, said that I know for many of you, I'm quoting here, I know for many of you, being in the office 3 days a week will be a big change. I truly understand that, but I also want to recognize remote work of any kind isn't even an option for many state employees. Now, not to put words in his mouth, but it does seem like he's nodding to the fact that some employees who can't work from home and don't have that flexibility might feel frustrated that some can work from home right now 5 days a week. Do you think a policy like this in any way could add some element of fairness that's currently lacking?
I think what's unfortunate is to see really an attempt by the governor to divide state employees. And, we celebrate at VSEA the folks all state employees are really heroic to be working in these tough times. The folks who show up at the work site because they have to be there are valued and definitely appreciated. But there's really no reason for the governor to divide the state employees, to try to divide them. We should be unifying state employees. We're about to have a barrage of a tsunami of negativity coming from Washington, D.C. that's going to affect people's ability to feed their families, to find housing, so many things, to find health care. And we need a state workforce that's robust, that's focused, that feels like the employer has their back. And in this case, trying to divide state employees sends the opposite message. So we really need to have a unifying message. Celebrate the folks who do have to go to the office physically or go to a facility physically. I will say, we're now on year 6 of an unprecedented staffing crisis in the Department of Corrections and in our hospitals. And we haven't seen much leadership from the governor on that. So it's a little bit hard for us to take that seriously when he hasn't really shown up for those employees either.
Well, we'll be joined by Governor Phil Scott on Vermont Edition on September 30th, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with him and with all of you then. Steve Howard is the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association. Steve, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got. Thank you to everybody who called in and wrote in with your thoughts on this complex conversation. Our show today was directed by Mary Angish. John Ahrens is our managing producer. Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro are our producers. Our call screener today was Kelly Delorier, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.